I just sold my 10-unit apartment for $1.2 million. Now that may not seem like a big deal until you realize that I paid $16,000 to get it less than 4 years ago. Sounds hard to believe, but in this video, I'm gonna break down how exactly I got that deal and why I chose to finally sell it. If you're new to my channel, my name's Ryan Pineda. I'm a real estate investor and entrepreneur, and the goal of this channel is to help people live the wealthy way. If you wanna learn more about what that is, go to wealthyway.com where you can get access to our free courses, our free planner, and our free Discord community. Now, I actually did a video about this apartment complex back in 2020 when I first got started on YouTube. It ended up being one of my first videos that ever got over 100,000 views, and a lot of people wanted to know the progress of that apartment. So if you want to watch that original video after this, where I walk through the apartment, I'll link to it down below. But anyways, you're probably wondering, how did I get this apartment for only $16,000 in the first place? Well, here's the story. Back in 2018, I was doing cold calling for off-market single-family home. We called this guy up who owned a rental property, and he said, look, I'm not interested in selling this home, but I do own this 10-unit apartment in downtown Las Vegas that I'd be interested in selling. Now, at the time when I was talking to this guy, I had no idea what the apartment was worth. I had never purchased an apartment. I had no experience at all. It was a drastically different time versus today, where we've purchased 460 units at Pineda Capital in just the last 5 months. By the way, if you're an accredited investor and you want to get in on our apartment deals now, you can go to pinedacapital.com to apply. Now, as I said, I had no idea back then how to evaluate a deal, but I do know when somebody is motivated to sell a property, you can figure out a way to do a deal. In almost everything I've done in my career, I figured out far more learning on the fly than I did trying to research it or watch YouTube videos about it. So in this case, I said, yeah, we're interested in buying your apartment. Give me the address. How much do you want for it? And we'll do some research. Well, at the time, he said he wanted $400,000 for the apartment. I decided to go on a website called upped, where a lot of commercial real estate is done, and I looked up what different apartments in that area were selling for. Unfortunately, there were not a lot of comparables, but overall, looking at everything, I thought that it might be worth around $700,000 fixed up and stabilized. So I knew at $400,000, there was definitely a good spread to make a deal. So I called him back and said, can I go see the units and see if there's a potential deal to be made here? He said we could go walk it, but there was no way to get inside the units because none of the tenants were paying and they were all squatting in the apartment. And that pretty much explained why he wanted to sell it at a discount. But anyways, we go down to the apartment and we start to drive around the neighborhood. Obviously, it's not the best neighborhood in town, but we wanted to see what the condition of the apartment was. Well, as we were walking around the backside, I noticed that there were some burn marks outside of one of the windows. As it turned out, we were able to sneak in that window and see that the entire apartment had been burnt to a crisp. It was one of the 2-bedroom units, which were the most valuable units in that apartment, and it was completely burnt down, and the seller had no idea. Unfortunately, I had to call the seller and be the bearer of bad news and let him know that one of the apartments had burnt down, and potentially another one, because we can't get in any of them, so maybe the one above it potentially got burned down as well. We weren't sure. And so seeing that, I said, you know, I don't know what's the condition of the rest of these units. I do know that getting all these tenants out of here is gonna be a huge headache, but I'll still make you an offer on it. And so I offered him $200,000 for this apartment. Well, he wasn't really too happy about the $200,000 offer, but we did stay in touch and I constantly kept following up with him. As it turned out, I realized that he had purchased the property for $300,000, and in his mind, he did not want to sell it for a loss, so $300,000 was what he really wanted. And I said, you know what, if you want $300,000, I can definitely give it to you, but we need to do some type of seller finance agreement. And he was completely open to that, and the agreement we struck was this. I would purchase the apartment for $300,000, and for my down payment, I would give him $16,000 to pay off all of the liens that he owed on the property. He hadn't been paying his property taxes for a few years. Along with that, I wasn't gonna have any payments on the property for 3 years. And the reason I worked that into the deal was because I told him it was gonna take a long time to get the tenants out, it was gonna take a long time to get them fixed up, and I wasn't gonna cash flow on this thing for at least the first year. And he totally understood. He was a really cool guy, he was also an entrepreneur himself, and he wanted to see me succeed on the deal. So we agreed to those terms for no payments for 3 years, and then after that, the next 7 years, I would have interest-only payments at 5%. So 5% interest on $300,000 is only $1,250 a month. So in my mind, I figured if I could get all 10 units rented at an average of $700 rent, you're talking about $7,000 in gross rents, with only a $1,250 mortgage payment. So for me, the deal was a no-brainer, being able to acquire this for only $16,000 down, and I ended up signing the deal with him. Now, getting him to sign the deal was a whole nother endeavor. I actually had to meet him in LA to sign the deal. That's where he lived, because he wasn't very good at using DocuSign, and he wasn't being receptive to other measures we tried to take to get the signatures. So I ended up driving there on my way to go on a cruise with my wife, and I got the thing signed before I boarded the boat. It was pretty crazy thinking about it in retrospect. But once we closed on the apartment, the first thing I did was work on getting all these tenants out. Getting them evicted was really difficult with all of the eviction laws, because what would end up happening is we would have one tenant who would get evicted, and then they would go move into another unit, and we'd have to evict that same tenant again because they're in a different unit. We also had people who were selling guns out of the apartment, and it was a whole big ordeal just getting these people out. Along with that, we also had to renovate that burn unit, and we were just looking at a crapshoot of how each other unit was done every time we evicted someone. But to make a long story short, eventually we got everyone out, we got every unit renovated, and it cost us about $200,000. Once that was done, we were making $7,000 a month, and I did not have a payment on it for 3 years, just making pure cash flow. Now, I had no intention to sell because I was fine making that cash flow, and it was a nice building for my portfolio. But I was having brokers and other investors reach out to me directly saying how much would I want to sell the apartment for. And this had happened for years, and I always told them I don't want to sell, I don't even have a mortgage on this. But that ended up changing this year with the market going so crazy. Right now, I thought that the building was worth about $1 million based on comps and what everything else was going for. And I had a broker say, just give me a price, I've got people interested, like what would it take for you to sell? And I said, I don't know, I would sell it for 1.3 million. If you can give me 1.3, I'll sell it. Eventually that broker ended up coming back to me for $1.05 million, and I said no. And then a couple of months later, he said, I think I have a buyer who's willing to pay you close to the 1.3. Can we go see it? And I said, sure, go ahead and see it, it's not a big deal. His new buyer saw it and said, I can't pay 1.3, but I can pay you 1.2, and that is my final offer. And as I started to look at it, I said, you know what, 1.2 is a really good offer, especially because I think it's only worth around $1 million, and I decided to do the deal with him. Also, before I tell the rest of the story, side note, when I finally had to start making payments on this property again, the $1,250, the seller, I called up and I said, hey, you know, I might end up selling this at some point. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do yet, but you know, where do you want the payment sent to? I've never had to even pay you to this point the last 3 years. And he said, you know what, Ryan, if you're gonna sell it, don't even worry about paying me. Like, you can just tack it on to the balance and, you know, pay me once you sell it. Which I thought was really cool, that he was still so cool after all this time, you know, having not spoke to him for many years. But anyways, back to the numbers on this property. Just based on the flip, I made about $650,000. Along with that, I collected over $200,000 in rents. And overall, this deal made me about $850,000 with just this $16,000 investment to buy it. But I should also add, after buying it, I ended up having to put over $200,000 of my own money into the renovation. But all of this leads to other questions that I've gotten since I've sold it. People wanna know, why not just hold it? Why not just cash flow? And if I was gonna sell, why not just 1031 exchange it? Or better yet, if I wanted the money, why not just refinance it? So let me explain my reasoning of why I chose to sell it and not do any of those other things. First off, I just got a crazy offer. Like 1.2 was way more than that thing is worth. So that's one of the main reasons. But the second thing I look at is all of the cash into that deal. I have to look at what kind of return could I get on it if I were to take it out of that deal. Let's just say this apartment was making me $4,000 to $5,000 a month in cash flow. It's getting $7,000 plus in rent. The mortgage is only $1,250. Obviously, we got some property management expense and other expense, but you know, if it's making me $4,000 a month, that means I'm making around $50,000 a year. Now, I had over $800,000 of cash that I would get back from this deal if I were to sell it. So really, you gotta look at the percentage and say, what kind of return am I getting? I'm making $50,000 on this $800,000 I could potentially have. So when you do the math, it really comes out to about a 6% return on what I'm getting by keeping that property. You just take 50,000 divided by 800,000. And obviously I know that I can beat a 6% return very easily. Now, you could also add the tax implications, which we'll get into here later, because I'm not gonna technically get $800,000 back if I have to pay tax. Maybe the return was 10% when you factor that into the equation. But nonetheless, I know I can beat 10%. Also, by selling it now, I'm kind of getting appreciation immediately, even though I didn't deserve it. If I were to wait naturally for it to be worth $1.2 million, maybe I gotta wait a few years, maybe the market tanks, who knows? But by taking this offer now, I pretty much lock in my appreciation today instead. Now, this leads to the next question of, since you've got this great offer, why not take it and then do a 1031 exchange? Well, for those you don't know, a 1031 exchange is a way for you to defer your capital gains tax bill on real estate. Basically, you would take all of your gain from the sale of a property and then you would put it into a brand new property. Now, in order to do this legally, you've got to have your money sent to a 1031 exchange company, so you're not even ever touching the cash. And then there are rules for the property that you're allowed to buy next. You've got to identify which property you want to buy in the next 90 days. You'll also have to buy that property within the next 180 days. And then obviously you're not really getting the cash. It's going into that next deal. So for me, I didn't really have a deal that I wanted to put it into, and I was really selling it to get the cash to use in other things. And I didn't want to be up against the timeline having to go use this money on a deal that wasn't necessarily great. And so for me, getting the cash was the #1 priority, so 1031 wasn't really an option. I'd much rather take the cash and put it towards my other businesses or put it towards my NFT project, which is going to involve real estate anyway. We're trying to help bridge real estate and crypto and create the next wave of digital real estate tycoons. But anyways, we decided not to do a 1031, so what are the tax implications on a gain this large? Well, first off, this is long-term capital gain, so selling it for a profit is going to be far less than selling a flip of this magnitude. Let's just say I get taxed on the $650,000 profit I made from selling the home, and I still got to recapture depreciation and some other expenses. If we just say that this gives me an $800,000 tax liability, if I'm at the 20% capital gains mark, I might owe around $150,000 worth of taxes. And so when I look at that, it's really like, okay, I'm just gonna get $650,000 back. And for me, I'd rather have $650,000 and use it towards some of the things I already talked about. And quite truthfully, I probably won't owe that much, because if I can buy other real estate throughout the year with myself and with my fund, I'm gonna get a lot of depreciation and I'm gonna do cost segregations, and it could potentially bring my tax bill down where I'm not even gonna have to pay that. It's one of the reasons why I'm buying huge apartment buildings with Pineda Capital. But that leads to the last question of, why didn't I just refinance the property instead? Well, originally this was the path I was going on, and they were gonna give me 60 to 70% of the appraised value. So let's just say it would have appraised at $1 million. That means they would have given me a loan for $600,000 to $700,000. Well, if they gave me $600,000 back and I owed $300,000 on the property, I was only gonna get $300,000 back. It's a good chunk of change, but I would rather sell it the way I did and get the full $800,000 back before I figure out what happens tax-wise. Also, the property itself isn't something that I really wanted to hold long-term. I'm really focused on buying these bigger apartment buildings now, and I'm also buying a lot of single-family homes here in Las Vegas. I'm essentially just cherry-picking our current flips in the best areas and planning to hold those single-family homes for the long term. So that's why I didn't refinance it, and overall, those are the reasons why I just sold it normally. And I hope that that story shows you that there are multiple ways to get a deal, and if you're not even ready to get a deal, do not discount when somebody wants to sell you a property, because it could be a life-changing deal. And if you want to learn how I find deals like that and you want to get into real estate investing, definitely check out Future Flipper. You can go to futureflipper.com to get a free consultation with my team, and I'll catch you on the next video. Peace.